one of Gaza's main fertility clinics, but 2 years in an Israeli attack. 4,000 embryos along with 1,000 sperm samples and unfertilized eggs were destroyed. One of several examples of what the UN calls Israel's systematic destruction of sexual and reproductive health care in Gaza, which has also targeted maternity hospitals. Experts say this could point to a strategy aimed at preventing birth.
That's literally what it was. Yeah. 49-page report came out detailing the harrowing nature of sexual violence that Israel has systematically deployed towards Palestinian civilians. 49 pages. No real evidence, no hard evidence has come out about sexual violence happening on October 7, let alone being directed by Hamas with mass occurring. How much has mainstream media talked about that? How much? For months and months and months on end. Now there's real hardline evidence from an independent probe from the United Nations Office of Humanitarian Rights from the Palestinian territories, occupied Palestinian territories, and there is very little coverage on this. I haven't heard a single goddamn person who is a liberal Zionist or a Zionist or even just like a liberal who claims to care about Palestine. I haven't heard them speak on this at all. And also, while mainstream media actively was like screams without words, this is like mass rapes occurred. Hamas did mass over and over and over again, including the mass atrocity propaganda that Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook put together, where she literally interviewed Zakah workers who unironically were more responsible for justice never being served for victims of October 7 because they up the bodies in an effort to try to promote their own goddamn corrupt ass charity. And Sheryl Sandberg interviewed Zakat officials who literally lied to her. And that documentary still gets play to this day. Ethan used a piece of the faulty testimony from that documentary in his content puke. Think about that. Ethan literally used a piece of that Sheryl Sandberg documentary in air quotes, as a testament, as proof that there had definitely taken place, mass had taken place, directed by Hamas. Now it's come out that Sheryl Sandberg is actually a sexual predator herself, as the other side. Anyway, now you have hardline evidence. You have hardline evidence. Okay, hardline evidence, 49 pages worth. Independent probe. And the way they cover it is UN reports accuses Israel of sexual genocidal acts in Gaza. Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, quickly condemned the report's findings as baseless. UN report accuses Israel of sexual against Palestinians. Netanyahu claims anti-Israel bias. UN report accuses Israel forces of genocidal acts, sexual in Gaza and the West Bank. Yeah. When Israel claims something, it's 100% correct. It's definitely correct. If you actually question it, you are Hamas, you are a rapist yourself, you're a denialist, all this shit. When Israel is probed by an independent commission, by the United Nations, and there's 49 pages worth of real evidence, nothing. Ethan also cited the UN report from UN Victims Advocacy Group claiming that the UN confirmed the mass hoax. The report didn't. Zakah was involved in steering that report. I know. The UN report only featured one instance of firsthand testimony of sexual occurring to a victim, and it didn't happen on October 7. It happened to one of the hostages. That was it. The UN report itself never actually said, we have found a complete assessment going through forensics data of all of the victims or the, that had taken place on October 7. Mass had taken place on October 7. Hamas-led mass had taken place on October 7. Those are three separate claims. And the UN report that I read on the stream that none of my interlocutors who keep saying I'm a denier or whatever have ever read because they don't know how to read. They're not literate or really care about it, because why should you? You could just lie about something, and as long as it goes along with like mainstream narratives, then people won't check you on it. Okay, you're a joke, dude. Don't ban that person. I want to know what he means by this. Like, I want to understand like why he's so upset about this. What did the documentary maker do? She's a predator. Yes, Sheryl Sandberg, who made that the atrocity propaganda flick with very little, with no like hardline evidence. Hi Hassan, I wasn't familiar with you until recently. I watched your debate with Asman, and as a white guy from Alabama, you brought a lot of points I'd never considered and actually changed my mind a lot. Wait, why'd you get timed out? What the? Oh, you wrote something too. Oh, maybe because you wrote Asman Gold, and Asman's name is auto-modded probably. All right, you're untimed out now. Yeah. In order for us to not get sucked into drama, because I always have a capacity to eat debate, I usually will just set up an auto mod. I don't know how you do it, man. All this evidence that proves you right over and over again. There's a sizable population of people who are just unreachable. It's mind-blowing to me. Yeah. It is what it is. There's not really much you can do. You just got to keep saying the truth. And eventually, people will come to their own conclusions, okay? Eventually. But yeah, this is the summarization of it. More than a human can bear, Israel's systematic use of sexual, reproductive, and other forms of gender-based since October 2023. This is actually systematic, by the way. Not a claim of systematic. But there's sufficient evidence in here to showcase both the moral depravity of the Israeli occupying forces, but also how much they've utilized sexual as a vehicle of war. Okay? I hope you understand that. There is nowhere near this level of evidence from any report on October 7 from an independent party or even Israelis themselves. There isn't. And I say this as someone who does not offhandedly discount the notion that sexual assault might have taken place on October 7. Position that sexual in all conflict is commonplace, and therefore the likelihood of sexual occurring on October 7 is not zero. Okay? I've never said it is. Having said that, however, there is no evidence as to sexual actually taking place on October 7. There has been no evidence whatsoever. The Israeli government has denied independent probes into the United Nations trying to actually go in and do forensic analysis. The most famous cases of secondhand and third-hand testimony was all discounted instantly. All of them. Haaretz has written detailed reports on this. It's like literally... it's literally out there if you want to read on this issue at all. Like Israeli media has written about it. As recently as a couple months prior, the main prosecutor that's supposed to be looking at like October 7th cases, straight up came out and said, we cannot find a single person to come out and say that they're like, we're looking, we want to prosecute these things, but there is no evidence. There's no hard evidence whatsoever. Yeah, Israel itself blocked the investigations immediately after October 7 and blocked the investigations numerous times, by the way. That is the highest degree of disrespect to the victims, mind you. Like, there is nothing more disrespectful than to look at a pile of bodies and be like, we're just going to use this for atrocity propaganda. We don't care about the humanity of these bodies. We don't care about the humanity of these citizens. And we don't care about what their families might want in terms of justice. Like, that is disgusting to me. That is completely morally repugnant behavior. It is utterly depraved. Oh, yeah. Despite several requests, Israel provided no evidence or access to investigate October 7 violations, including sexual allegations. Key details. The Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory in Israel said it made several requests for information and access from government of Israel from October 7 through January 15, 2025, but it received no responses. The commission also did not receive from Israel any further information on violations and abuses committed by the military wing of Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups. The commission further notes that no information about prosecutions of members of Hamas and other armed groups for the crimes committed on October 7th has been shared. I don't know. I think the people who killed them are worse. That's actually a great point. You're not wrong about this. You're not wrong. Of course, if you have been fucking murdered, then yeah, your murderer is the primary responsible party. But don't you think your government is supposed to protect you and actually figure out who murdered you, how they murdered you, especially in the case of Israel openly admitting to utilizing the Hannibal Directive? The Hannibal Directive is an Israeli military doctrine that dictates that if Israeli citizens, whether they are members of the IDF or just regular civilians, are captured by any sort of Palestinian militancy, it is military doctrine to kill them. Because in the hands of the Palestinians, they are a bargaining chip that Israel does not want to deal with. So they just literally fucking kill the hostages. That is their military doctrine. And it's not just their military doctrine that people speculated was being applied on October 7. Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister of Israel, a war criminal, came out and openly admitted to the utilization of the Hannibal Directive on October 7. There was already plenty of evidence in the aftermath of October 7 that the Israeli tanks actually shelled some of the kibbutzim and caused some of the explosions and the deaths of Israeli civilians that were inside of the kibbutzim. According to firsthand eyewitness testimony from someone who survived the attacks, first by Palestinian militancy and then by the Israeli occupying forces. But having said that, now it is completely official. We don't know what the exact number was in terms of the 1,200, 400 being, what was it? 400 being soldiers and then 800 being civilians. We don't know exactly what number of the civilians that were killed by the Israeli military, whether it be helicopters that were just fucking spraying all of the cars that were trying to escape the Nova Festival, or whether it be the tanks rolling up to the kibbutzim and blowing them up. But I think you and I would both agree that, you know, it is up to the government to honestly make an assessment over who killed who on October 7, specifically so that there can be some kind of restitution, some kind of justice for the victims that were killed on October 7. And I'm not saying that because I believe that like Hamas didn't kill any of the civilians. It was just the military. I don't believe that at all. I don't think that that is the case. I don't believe that that is the case at all. But I think it is important to investigate these issues specifically so you can, specifically so that the victims can finally have some answers. The family members of victims can finally have some answers. So yes, you're not wrong. I think the people who killed them are worse, but the question remains, who killed them and how they were killed? Was sexual violence a thing that occurred? This is important for the families to learn about as well. And that's precisely the reason why many of the victims from October 7 and their family members have sued the Israeli government time and time again. There are victims from the Nova Festival, survivors from the Nova Festival, for example, that have sued the Israeli government because they thought it was fucking insane that the Israeli government, knowing full well ahead of time that there was militancy activity happening at the fucking the barrier in the Gaza envelope, still chose to continue the Nova Festival a third fucking day. Anyway, so you didn't answer any of my questions here, but I hope I was able to inform you on what my perspective is. It's also funny because like people that come in here and just go, you're a terrorist, I'm sorry, this is one of the issues where I have a lot more knowledge than the average person, okay? I normally wouldn't say this with a high degree of confidence, but you don't want this fucking smoke. There's a reason why none of your favorite content creators want to talk to me about this shit. And that is because they're oblivious, and it's much easier for them to consistently tell their audiences that I'm a bad guy and an Islamist fundamentalist and a terrorist and want to undermine Western civilization or some shit. Okay? Much easier to do that from the shadows than to actually come in here and have a direct conversation with me, because it would be people would very quickly understand who knows what in that situation. It's much easier to hide behind clips that are cut out of context and be like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a terrorist. Anyway, let's continue.
Births within a specific group, one of the legal definitions of genocide.
Our report finds that Israel has increasingly employed sexual, reproductive and other forms of gender-based violence against Palestinians as part of a broader effort to undermine their right to self-determination.
The Commission documented a range of violations against Palestinian women, men, girls and boys, and it alleges that Israeli security forces have carried out systematic rape and other forms of gender-based violence, including forced public stripping, sexual assaults and genital violence. According to the UN, these acts were committed under explicit orders from Israel's top military leadership.
But sexual and gender-based violence is increasingly used as a method of war by Israel to destabilize, dominate, oppress and destroy.
Once again, projection, by the way. Good one, dude. Projection. When Israel's like, Hamas actually had a military directive to rape all the Israeli women or whatever. That's just fucking projection. I have court evidence from the SSA trial that just went into the public. Is there any way I can send it to you so you can read it? They're trying to sue this to keep the information private. I don't know what you're talking about. They accuse you of denying sexual assault when systematic sexual assault is a different accusation with a correspondingly high standard of evidence. It is not some random acts of war crimes that happen in every conflict. Yes, but the standard for evidence for sexual assaults is also high. And they haven't fucking even reached that standard either. Like if your top accusers, like if the only thing that we have here is like eyewitness testimony that immediately gets discounted, immediately gets debunked, then how the fuck can you say it happened? Everything is just, even the UN report that we read quite literally just rehashed. The initial UN report that came out simply just rehashed what the Israeli government was saying. And they openly admitted it. They said, we found only circumstantial at best evidence for sexual assaults happening by looking at the photos that were handed to us by the Israeli government. There's only one claim. There was only one claim, and it wasn't from October 7. It was from a captive that actually was a first-hand account of a sexual assault taking place while one of the Israelis was held hostage. That's it. That was the only one by UN's own definition actually reached the standard of hard evidence. It's very strange to keep litigating this over and over again. There is no reason for me to fucking deny that if rapes definitely happened, there's no reason for me to deny it. Why the fuck would I deny it? I've made my position known. People have actually used that position against me by, again, clipping me out of context where I said, even if sexual violence did take place on October 7, that doesn't justify genocide. I think that's a pretty normal position to have. That is my position. Nothing justifies a genocide. I'll take it one step further. I don't think that a genocide against all Israelis is justifiable because of this report that just came out, okay? That is my real position. That is my moral position. This report that documented 49 fucking pages of Israel engaging in the act of systematic sexual violence against Palestinians, both held captive and across the board in Gaza and in the West Bank, does not justify genociding Israel. It doesn't. Nothing justifies it. Nothing. Like they aren't assaulting Palestinians sexually? Wait, what? No, they are. They are. We know that they are. There is no such thing as defensive genocide, okay? There's no such thing. That is just like the Israeli position right now, but that's not a real thing. Let's continue.
The Palestinian people.
Yeah, there's also the Israeli, as far as the Israelis raping Palestinians to death, it's on camera, chat. They literally did it on fucking CCTV. So there's a dead person who died after being anally raped by the Israeli concentration camp guards. So we know that that actually happened. There's a victim, there's an autopsy report, and they did it on fucking camera. And when the government tried to prosecute them because they were worried that the fucking the ICC was going to come after them for that as well, in an effort to use complementarity as a shield, they tried to prosecute the soldiers, and then Israel did a pro-rape riot. Israel did a pro-rape riot where they successfully got the rapist concentration guards camps out of jail. They released them. And then the Israeli government turned around and became an incredibly famous television figure in Israel. He unmasked himself voluntarily and said, I was the top rapist. And he became a beloved television personality. Think about how fucking insane that is. Think about the moral rot in a society such as that one. This is precisely the reason why I say Israel is a Nazi society. That is just the fucking truth. And I don't know how you engage in the act of rehabilitation, but I can't even think of that at this point. Yeah, Israeli protesters held a rally for the right to rape prisoners. The Israeli Knesset held an emergency meeting. And in the Israeli Knesset, where they held an emergency meeting, a member of Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party came out and said, of course, the concentration camp guards have a right to rape Palestinians. Like, they actively had this fight on camera. Now, just because you didn't hear about this doesn't mean it didn't fucking happen. It is on you to, at the very least, not come in here with some kind of fucking energy without any of this information in your mind. Just because your favorite content creator didn't see it does not mean that it didn't happen. They did this, covered it at the time. Perhaps I know more than you on this issue, and that's why I'm so fucking angry. Perhaps my anger and resentment does not stem from some sort of secret anti-Semitism in the way that all these fucking dipshits claim. Okay? That's it. I hate addressing this over and over again every single day, but like, the dumbest person you've ever encountered will just come out and make a fucking YouTube video basically rehashing like Reddit posts that they've seen with like 12-second clips, and then it becomes my problem. And because I want to constantly educate people who are misguided, I have to sit there and fucking over and over again repeat my points over and over again to people who don't even care about it. Fuck. Anyway, here it is. Sheryl Sandberg, former Facebook COO who directed the documentary Screams Before Silence, alleging mass sexual violence by Hamas on October 7th, without presenting credible evidence or identifying survivors, is now facing accusations of sexual misconduct herself. In a memoir by Sarah Wynne Williams, Sandberg is alleged to have spent $13,000 on lingerie for herself and her assistant during a work trip and engaged in intimate behavior, such as inviting the assistant to come to bed on a private jet. I know a crusty leftist who did the same thing to you recently. Streamer clearly didn't do his research. They're not a competent person. If they hear what I have to say about, especially on this issue, if they hear what I have to say and they're like, well, I disagree with it, then I don't know how much of a fucking real leftist they are, you know? Anyway, there was a Haaretz report on Israel using Palestinians as human shields. That's another thing.
Documented a pattern of sexual violence.
Israel also admitted that as well. Something, dude, that's why I always say, like, if you want to know what the fuck Israel's up to, if you want to be woke, if you want to actually be aware of like what is exactly happening, you can wait for the New York Times to write about it 6 months in the future, or you can be in here right now and learn about it in real time. And there's not always an assurance that the New York Times is going to write about it 6 years or 6 months in the future anyway.
Including cases of rape and other forms of sexual violence, torture and other inhumane acts that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lashed out at the Human Rights Council. In a written statement, he calls it a rotten, anti-Semitic, terrorist-supported and
Get the fuck out of here, you piece of shit. You want to know what Israel's up to? Simply follow their media. I mean, that's what I do. Yes. I'll tell you another thing. I wonder if any of these liberal Zionists or any of these people who are supposedly progressive or masquerade as progressives, did they talk about Mahmoud Khalil? Did they talk about his arrest? Did they talk about his deportation, his possible deportation? The reason why I ask that question is because if they do talk about that, they will perhaps realize that the same slander and same smears that they've used, that the American government has weaponized against him, they most likely have weaponized against me as well, with the hopes that a similar thing might happen to me down the line too. So if they fucking actually have to come out and be like, well, this is a severe violation of the First Amendment, it's going to come across like kind of hypocritical, don't you think?
Relevant body. This UN report is the first in-depth investigation into gender-based violence by Israeli forces since Hamas' October 7th attack, which triggered the war in Gaza.